So what's your next one?
Yeah, so
I think I
number
know what it is.
15 is the other album I do not own, and that is Rush's last album, and that is Clockwork Angels with the really cool clock cover.
Yes.
Yes. And
And
I
you
actually,
notice
yeah,
if you calculate this, if you read this in military time, it's 21:12 o'clock.
that's awesome. That's really awesome.
Fun fact.
Yeah. I
All right,
don't know.
I'm really fond of this album, but
Oh
I'm
my.
curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so this, for whatever reason, this is the other one I just never bought. I had a friend in college who had it and ripped me a copy, and then I just had the ripped copy, and I listened to it on my iPod. I had the
You
iPod
know,
Classic, and I had that on there.
you
It
know,
still
music
works.
piracy is not a victimless crime.
I know. I wouldn't download a bear, and I certainly wouldn't download this illegally, but I would borrow it from a friend. You know, I probably will buy it at some point also,
Yeah.
but just haven't gotten there yet, and I'm sorry to those victims. Yeah, this album's neat because it's their only concept album, and it's their last album. I also, a fun little tidbit, I saw Rush one time, and it was during the Time Machine tour, which is pretty amazing. And they played Caravan and BU2B during that tour. And I think those were the debut performances of that
They were.
that material. Yeah, and they were pretty great. Caravan especially, I really liked. I still really like. I think Caravan's an amazing song.
Mm-hmm.
This album I'm just not as familiar with as a lot of the other stuff here, but it's this was the one that I saved for last for our binge here
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah,
it's the
so did
last
I.
one, and it really does serve as a nice capstone to their amazing career. It is a nice summary and mission statement of everything that they're doing. It does a really good job of combining everything they've done before and put it into something new, which is a really awesome strength of this record to me. It also has some new twists and turns in there. Like there's some stuff that's straight up heavy metal
Sure.
in there, and there's new ways of doing stuff that they've been doing for a while. I think the only reason, besides the unfamiliarity, I think the main reason why it's lower on this ranking is because of the production. Again, I don't think it's bad, and it kind of serves the sound of the album, but it does. It's really compressed and it's thin, and it really, after a while, it bothers me, and also it makes all the dynamics suffer because I don't really hear the strings at all until I wrote it in my notes, until halfway through the song, the records. That's when I first noticed the strings. Like, oh my gosh, there's a string orchestra in this album. I forgot about this.
Yeah.
I think that's the only really thing that stinks about it, because there's a lot of really strong stuff here. And again, it's length too. Like this album is a little long. But
It is.
of the last three records, I think this is the one where the length is most forgivable because the concept is really strong and it ties together really well. There's great motifs through the whole thing. And I also really want to say there's two songs on here that are really amazing, amazing Rush songs. As one is Headlong Flight. I think it's the best song on here. It absolutely smokes. Everything about it rules. I love it. And The Garden is a really special and beautiful song. I listened to that this morning actually, and I was starting to get a little teary eyed in the car. It's a beautiful song. It really is. That's the last song that Rush has recorded in the studio, or the last one on the album anyway. And it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Really emotional stuff for us fans.
It is. Well, I have lots to say about this record. It's a little bit higher on my personal list. I have it at 12, so it's not a lot higher. But I have it at 12, and I got to see this tour. This was the first and only Rush tour that I ever saw. And this material really did come to life on that tour, and that was a special experience for me to be in the same hall as these three giants of music. And not only giants of music, but people who influence the way I think about life and the world. To be there among them was really something special, and I don't think I quite realized how special it was until it was long over. But yeah, this material really does come to life live, and the concept is loose enough kind of this steampunk idea where it's like the future as envisioned by people living in the 1800s. So we're still powered by steamships, not electricity yet. And it's like cyberpunk is like it's like those are the two sides of the coin. A steampunk is one side and cyberpunk is like the opposite. But I really just feel like this whole steampunk aesthetic, the trappings of the story, is really just a vessel in which Neil talks about his life. And you can see, like, if you read along with the story, and there is actually a book co-written by Kevin J. Anderson, which I haven't read, unfortunately, but there is a book that goes much more into detail. But my experience with the album and reading the little paragraphs that are included is that this is Neil's life. So like a song like Caravan, where he talks about working on the farm and waiting for the first caravan to pick him up and take him out into the wider world. I can easily draw a comparison between that and a young Neil Peart working the parts counter at his dad's store and waiting for a band to take him out and show him the world. You mentioned Headlong Flight, which to me is like the strongest song on the album, or at least the most memorable song. If I were to make a Rush best of, that's the tune I would pick, is what I'm saying. And that has a quote from Freddie Gruber, Neil Peart's drum instructor from the late 90s, where he says, "I wish I could live it all again." And that's not a sentiment that Neil shared, but it's a sentiment that he admired. And I love that there's those little bits of his life that are woven in. And there's some other songs, like I know The Wreckers really impressed me live because it's just like a very specific kind of ballad that Rush didn't do a whole lot of, but it's got that epic pounding of the strings behind it. I love the title track, Clockwork Angels, for its little journey that it takes you on. The Anarchist is just one of the baddest Rush songs ever made. And I think when I first wrote a review of this back in 2012, I said that I didn't like Wish Them Well, but now it's one of my favorites because I love the whole idea of, it's not a forgive and forget song, but it's definitely a forget song. It's like, just, it's like if somebody's grinding your gears, the best thing you can do is just wish them well and move on with one's life.
Yeah.
But I do feel like this is one of those albums where there isn't a bad song on it. Every song is excellent. There's nothing I would lose. If there's anything that makes me rank it at 12 and not in my top 10 or top 5, it's like you said, it's the production. And even the DVD, the Blu-ray of this show suffers from the same issues where it's a better performance. You can hear the strings better, but it's still just oppressively loud. It's not painful. It's not vapor trails, but it is unpleasant. And the production is something that, specifically the mastering, is something that kind of puts me at odds with this record and makes me not play it as much as I probably would otherwise. But I think this is a great way to end their career. They left us wanting more. And isn't that so much better than saying that, oh, I'm tired of those guys? No, they left us like feeling like I would, I kind of want to see them continue. So, obviously the end of Rush is a gut punch for a lot of us when the news of Neil's passing, finally was released to the media, and it does make a song like The Garden so bittersweet. So that's my thoughts on this album. I just for the sake of ranking, it's at number 12 for me, but it's truly one of my favorites of theirs, I think.
Yeah, it is a great one. And, the more I listen to it and understand it, the probably would rise up as well.
Yeah.
It's got more of an emotional heft to it than a lot of their other albums.
Yes.
Which is, a special thing unto itself. It's almost like, for me, a lot of the 80s albums have emotional weight to them. And I think Definitely. It has kind of the same kind of jazz, which I love about it as well. Yeah.
I think an important thing to mention that we didn't mention is that this was a return to Rush working the way that they used to work, which is they would get together and actually bang out the songs together in a room.
Right.
Starting with, I want to say either Grace Under Pressure or Power Windows, they demoed things. And that obviously makes the compositions come out quite a bit differently. And I think that with this one especially, you have a lot of ties to the late 70s and even mid 70s Rush records. Like there's a direct quote from Bastille Day in Headlong Flight, which is really cool. It's like that makes me happy. I like that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
All right, so we are at
number 14.
14.
Yeah, man, these guys have a lot of albums, huh? Yeah, so number 14 for me is Snakes and Arrows. This is a somewhat personal one for me because this was the first Rush album that came out while I was a fan. I was not listening to Rush in the 90s. I was too young. And I only got into Rush when I was in early high school. But I was in high school when this album came out. And I bought it soon after it came out. And I remember listening to it with, my uncles and my dad and, having a lot of good times with it. I think it's great. I think this is one of their most underrated albums because there's a lot of really cool and interesting stuff on here. Like, Rush is experimenting, but at the same time, they're also like really back. Like we said before, like Far Cry comes in like hello, this is like one of the best Rush songs, period. And
Hemispheres chord.
yeah, the Hemispheres chord is here and the whole song just rips. It has really great lyrics also too. One day I'm ahead of the wheel and next it's rolling over me. I can get back on. Get back on. Yeah, that's great.
That song was explosive. I mean, literally they fired off like
there was like crazy pyrotechnics going on.
Yeah, but that awesome. Was they closed the first set on the show that I saw with that.
Oh, and that's awesome.
I was like just stunned by it. I was like, wow, I didn't know that song was that good. I always liked it, but that really worked for me.
Yeah, it's got, I think this album has some really tremendous lyrics from Neil. Across, like every song has great lyrics. Even like there's a couple songs that are just not as amazing as the other ones, but they have still good lyrics or great lyrics even. There's a lot to unpack here. Not just in the lyrics too, in the music. There's a lot to uncover. Yes. I think Alex Lifeson is also really shining on this record. He plays a few tremendous solos, and there's a lot of
playing differently too.
Yeah,
like,
it's
differently
really
than he
different.
ever did before.
Yeah, doesn't sound like any other Rush record in terms of guitar playing, and all the acoustic stuff and the mandolin stuff is really something else on this album. It's tremendous. I think this is a really strong record overall. Really, and it also has 3 instrumentals, one of which may or may not count as an instrumental, more of a solo piece.
More of an interlude.
Yeah, it's like an interlude, but it's a really nice acoustic guitar piece, Hope. And you also have the main Monkey Business, which is just a mission statement of why Rush is so good at making instrumentals.
Yep.
It cooks, and it's got lots of interesting ideas and lots of good like motifs as a songwriting standpoint. And then my favorite, is Malignant Narcissism, which is just a really, really awesome instrumental. And that was like written like last minute also, right?
Right. Yeah. There's usually one of those per album, where it's like, okay, gents, we're 3 minutes away from having a complete album length. Let's come up with something. And they just knock it out in like a day. And yeah, Malignant Narcissism was the piece on this, and that song in particular, or that piece in particular, has a real immediacy to it. But this is an album that when it came out, I didn't appreciate it that much. I thought it was kind of lackluster, but over time, and especially within the last year, it's risen the ranks, and I've played it quite a bit. And it's become one of my favorites. In fact, it is just outside my top 10 at number 11. I like this record for the same reason you do. It's very diverse musically. It's almost got like a folky through line through it that's very different for them.
Yes.
To point out like a song that I love Working Them Angels. Like it's like this blue collar factory town anthem. It's almost like Working Man again. But it's almost like a road song too. So it ties into to Driven and Red Barchetta and Ghost Rider. Like it feels like it's still part of that same same strain of Neil's writing. A song that I love also is Spindrift.
Yeah, I love that
and
one too.
my story with this one is that when I was in high school, I was involved with the radio program, and I used to play my own music. Well, one day, an edict came down from the like the higher ups, the teachers or whatever, saying that we cannot have kids bring in their own music anymore. They have to play the provided music on our CDs that we have. And as a matter of protest, they had Spindrift on one of those CDs, and I just played it on a loop. Every one of my shifts, I just played that song on a loop. and so now when I hear it, it's like, oh yeah, that was the song that I protested with. I think those guys would appreciate that. But yeah, Main Monkey Business, that's actually my favorite of the instrumentals on this. I love the song The Way the Wind Blows. That's another song that just feels so lyrically relevant to these times, and there's something comforting about the fact that, or maybe that's not even the right word, but there's something comforting about the fact that a lot of Neil's lyrics from like 1985 forward feel contemporary to me. But the other song I thought I would mention that we haven't discussed is Faithless.
I love that
which
song.
Oh yeah, it's like this agnostic anthem. It's like you can call me faithless, but I believe in hope. I believe in the power of the goodness of human beings, and that's all I need. That's the only faith for me. Oh man, that's one of my favorites on this record.
This time listening, like big time.
Now this is an album that does suffer from being long.
Yeah,
it's like another like 67, 70-minute album. And by the time I get to the last couple of tracks, I'm a little bit worn out. It's one of those that the production is compressed, but it's not too bad.
Yeah, I don't think it's as offensive as the other ones are.
No, especially the two around it, Vapor Trails and Clockwork Angels. This is by far my favorite production-wise of the three. Even though maybe the material on Clockwork Angels is more consistent, I just find that this album is it's got more to discover, and I can hear it better. So for me, it's placed a little higher on my list.
The only reason I don't rank this album higher is there are a couple of songs that, like you said, the length kind of gets a little tiring. Like Armor and Sword could be a lot shorter. There's a couple of songs that are just okay. Like I'm not huge on Good News First, but it is such a weird song, and part of me is kind of glad it's here because it just, to me, sounds like nothing else that they've done. It's just completely Bizarro World Rush. There's a couple other songs that could maybe be trimmed. I can't think of any on there, just by a few seconds, and it might make them a little stronger,
Yeah.
Other than that, this album's really great, and it deserves more attention because I feel like nobody talks about this album, at least on any discourse that I am aware of, and I think that's a huge mistake because it is a really great album with a lot of interesting and diverse material.
Yep.
There's nothing else quite like this one in the Rush catalog, and it deserves a place to be there.
Yep. For me, it's one of the more experimental ones, and one of the more diverse ones. Like it again, like it's almost like Tallish. With some of those folky, and like the mandolins coming in spots. It almost feels like Alex introduced a whole new style to the guitar playing that we just never knew he could do. That bluesy, that folk blues sound. But the thing I wanted to mention was that we're now at number 14 on your list, and I should go back and say that my number 15 was Fly By Night, and my number 14 was actually Roll the Bones. And we will talk about them because they're higher on your list.
Yes.
But all things considered, let's move on to your number 13.
So my number 13 is Roll the Bones. This is an album that I really grew to appreciate over the last few years. For some reason, one of my other close friends, he is a big Rush fan like we are, and he loves this album. And look, this was like 5 or 6 years ago or something, but he's like, you got to hear Roll the Bones, man. It's great. I was like, I haven't heard this album in so long. And then I spun it and went, oh, it is great. Okay. There's a lot of fun material on here. I think this is maybe Rush's most poppy or accessible album in a lot of ways.
I would agree. Yep.
I think that lends strength to this album, quite frankly, because it's definitely different than everything else, but it's still got all the things that make Rush great. The first 3 songs are on, come on, let's face it, they're classics. You have Dreamline, which is a banger, Bravado, which is one of their most beautiful ballads, and then Roll the Bones, which is a concert favorite. And yes, we both like the rap. The rap is great. And I learned that it's Geddy doing it, not Neil.
Although different resources say different things.
Really?
Yes. So, okay. The Contents Under Pressure book, the Martin Popoff book, Neil says he did it. In Geddy's biography, My Effin' Life, he says that he did it. He said that they tried out different people. I think they even tried some hip hop people that they liked.
Interesting.
To do it, and it just didn't fit with what they wanted. And so what they ended up using was Geddy's guide track and pitching it down. I would like to, because obviously I have a studio at my fingertips. One of these days I'm going to sit down and try pitching that up and see if I can. Okay, that's Geddy or that's Neil, but Rupert Hine, the producer, says that it's also Geddy, but that they tried different people. So I'm wondering if Neil just remembers doing it, but didn't remember who's actually ended up on the album.
Yeah.
And that's like, it's like the Rashomon effect, where everybody remembers something just a little bit different. But anyway, sorry,
No, you're good. It's this is the Rashomon effect, truthfully.
The Rashomon.
But you get Face Up, I think, is a really fun song. It's just one of those that it makes you happy. Like, this album is a very happy Rush album, and I love that about it. I also really appreciate the awesome instrumental, Where's My Thing? That's a lot of fun.
Great live, by the way.
Yeah, it's kick-ass live.
They did that on Clockwork Angels, and I was like, oh, that one's good. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's great. I also really love The Big Wheel, especially that chorus, looking for love. It's so great. And it has one of my favorite deep cuts in the whole catalog in Ghost of a Chance.
Yeah.
Which is a terrific relationship song. It also has one of my favorite Alex guitar solos as well. Ghost of a Chance rules. That's, for me, the highlight of the whole disc. I love that song. Yeah, it's strong.
Somehow we find one another. Yeah, through all that charade. Exactly. I love it. Love it.
Our entire lives are like happenstance.
Yep.
It's pretty amazing. The reason why this isn't higher is, I think start to get a little tired after a while. Like, after Ghost of a Chance, like, Neurotica is just okay, and I don't jive as well with You Bet Your Life either. It's just not my favorite closer. Rush, I'll talk about this more as we go on to some of my more favorite records, but they are the band that writes some of the best closing songs on their records. But I don't think You Bet Your Life is one of them, unfortunately. No. And those are it's
just not memorable.
No, it's not memorable. It has that like somewhat forgettable quality to it,
Yep.
But that's really about it. Like, this is, I think, the beginning of, like, for me, this is the really good to great area of the discography.
Yeah.
This is like the little brother to Presto in some ways too.
Right. It's Presto side B, and even Rupert Hine, the producer, said that. In an interview that I read. Yep. My number 13 is Presto. But I had Roll the Bones at 14. So the band thought quite a lot of this record. Like, they thought that Presto could have been better. And that they felt like they achieved what they wanted to with Presto on this one. I'm not sure I agree. I actually find that Presto is more rewarding over time.
Yeah, Presto's a lot better for me.
Yeah, despite the fact that the opening 3 songs, like you said, are classics. Bravado is one of those concert numbers that just took on a whole new life when they played that live, and they added sections to it, extended certain parts, and kind of jammed it. I really like that. It's one of those like all-time great Rush ballads. They always had a ballad on all their albums, but like Different Strings from Permanent Waves was like, to me, that was like the first, like, okay, they're really starting to go somewhere with these ballads. But I feel like this song is kind of a maturation of that that idea that started all the way back. Like even the first album, I think, has a ballad. But Roll the Bones, like I've always loved the rap in it. I've always thought that was a lot of fun. I never got offended by it like some of the fans did at the time. I always thought that was just Rush being fun and funky.
Yeah.
Where's My Thing is a great instrumental. It's not quite up to the level of Leave That Thing Alone, which would be on the follow-up counterparts. But this is another funky instrumental track that came to life for me when I saw it performed live on the Clockwork Angels tour. I actually find Face Up slightly forgettable. It's like kind of almost too generic for me. I love the Big Wheel. That one and Ghost of the Chance are like, very similar kinds of songs. And a song like Ghost of a Chance, again, I'm going to connect this back to Permanent Waves with like Inner New, like that whole relationship thread that maybe started back on Inner New is coming back. And oh, by the way, it's going to come back again on Counterparts in a big way. Ghost of a Chance, I think, is one of the most memorable songs on this album. I love the sentiment. Neurotica, I actually disagree with you on Neurotica. I think it is kind of cool. I like the riff on it, and I like the wordplay. It's kind of hard to come up with things to say about this album, but I do enjoy it while it's on. I don't enjoy it as much as the next album.
Same.
Though. Actually, either album on either side of the chronology. And again, it's one of those albums that took me quite a while to get into, but it's got some merits. It's got some really strong songs on it. Like, I know I'm rambling, but Dreamline, go and check out the version of Dreamline that was on the Clockwork Angels tour sometime, where they added the strings to it. It is epic. Oh my goodness. It's like hair on the back of your neck, chills stuff, with those string players on top. But I think I've exhausted all I want to say about this one. Yes. So we are moving on to your number 12. And I guess, we're now catching up. My number 12 is Clockwork Angels.
Oh, nice.
Your number 12 is?
My number 12 is Fly By Night Away From Here. Yeah, Fly By Night is my number 12. So this is one, I will also say this is one of my favorite album covers, period. I love the snowy owl on the cover here. It's just awesome. It kind of like, it also fits the music really well, strangely. This is, like we've alluded to before, this is the album where we think Rush really begins, and that's a large part because of Neil's presence. His spectacular drumming and his lyrics really elevate just about everything to another level. This album I originally had a little lower, but on re-listen, I realized, how much I still love this album. It's so much fun. It's got the energy of the first album, but all the songs are better. The songwriting really kicked into high gear here. You have Anthem, Beneath, Between, Behind, The Best I Can, Bytor and the Snow Dog, Making Memories. All of those songs are a blast to listen to. And you have In the End, which is, I think, the first really amazing Rush closing song.
Although Working Man, I think might take that.
Yeah,
it's
funny. I kind of forget that that's a closing song. I don't know. I just like Working Man is just a great song to me. I don't necessarily view it in the same headspace as finishing an album kind of thing. Right. But In the End really like puts the cap on this. It's a really well made record. I think. The only, I also should say that Bytor and the Snow Dog is the first long form song in the catalog.
Yeah,
and it's
the first prog song.
Yeah, it's really awesome. I have a special love for that tune, and also the live versions that are out there also are really amazing.
Yeah, All the World's a Stage is one of their best live records because it's so raw.
But I think the only things about this album I'm not huge on are Rivendell. I love Tolkien. I'm a huge Tolkien fan myself, but the song doesn't really work for me. I don't know. It's just kind of like they're trying the ballad thing, and it's not really clicking yet. It's kind of pretty forgettable for me. And I like Fly By Night. I still do, but it's lower compared to the rest of the material on here. for me. I don't know, something about it, I guess. I still love this album, right? This is I think maybe the first one on this ranking where I was like, all right, I love this album kind of thing.
This one's at number 15 for me. I have it quite a bit lower than you do. But just hearing you talk about it makes me wish that I had placed it higher, because when I was going back and listening to these albums, I think this is the one that surprised me the most.
Yeah.
With how much I enjoyed it. Because it's like you put on Anthem and it's like, oh, they are here. They have arrived. This is confident. Neil's all over the skins. Like, he's just sounds like an octopus.
Yeah.
He's moving so fast. And that, like, Anthem is one of those just signature Rush tunes that it's like you name Rush, and that's one of the songs, like maybe like one in the first 5 that I'd think about. Best I Can, this is a song that was a leftover from the John Rutsey era, so it doesn't quite fit with the rest of the material, but it's fun. I love Beneath, Between, and Behind. That's like prog punk before prog punk was even a thing, because it's just punchy and it's wordy, but I love it. I love the way that Geddy delivers the lyrics on that. And he talks about how that was the first time that he ever edited any of Neil's lyrics, because he just looked at it and he's like, oh my God, how am I going to fit all of these words? The whole idea that, we need a lyricist, because like on the first album, John Rutsey was writing the lyrics and he bailed on him. He took the lyrics and threw them up and tossed them in the fire, and he said they weren't any good. So Geddy and Alex had to write the lyrics last minute on that first album, and it shows. You can really tell that the lyrics are undercooked.
Yes, they are.
But here you have who's this, lanky guy that reads all the time? What's his deal? Maybe he can write lyrics for us. He knows words. And Beneath, Between, and Behind being one of those like first really wordy, literate Rush songs. And even Anthem, I mean, that's of course very literate. We don't want to go down the On Rund.
No, we don't want to do that.
We don't want to go down that too far, other than to say that, yes, that came from a book. Here's the band hyping up literature, not drugs and excess.
Yes.
But Bytor and the Snow Dog, I think, is the most important song in terms of the band's development, because here's the first cinematic Rush song where you can close your eyes and it plays a movie in your mind. And a lot of this has to do with Terry Brown's production. He was big in supporting their more cinematic goals. And there's like such creative ideas in this song, like Geddy's tuning down his bass to get that horrendous growl sound that he uses in the section where they're attacking one another. You also have, again, like another one of those key Rush tracks in the title track, Fly By Night. That's one that it's like immediately I think of Rush, and that's like, again, like within the top 5 songs that I probably would think of, along with songs like Tom Sawyer and Free Will and Spirit of Radio. Making Memories, that's a song that, it's a little bit naive, but I really like it. It maybe was fine-tuned a bit for 2112 with Lessons. I actually do like Rivendell. I like the whole sentiment of peace of mind and sanctuary where the Dark Lord can't go. There's something that speaks to my soul, the escapist soul in me. They definitely did perfect the ballad as we went forward. I mean, we were just talking about Bravado, and that's like peak Rush ballad. But I love In the End as a closer. And it works well for the All the World's a Stage album as well. But as we said, this is the beginning of Rush. The first album is historically important. But if I were to point to an alien from outer space and say, where does Rush begin? I would hand them this record. You're number 11. What's your number 11, Mike?
Yeah. So this, I think, is the section of my ranking where the controversy will begin. And my number 11 is the album Hemispheres, which we will show a nice picture of the iconic album art of Hemispheres.
Mine, by the way, is Snakes and Arrows, although I may have said that already, but my number 11 is Snakes and Arrows. So, Mike, tell us.
Right.
Tell us, why did you choose Hemispheres as your number 11?
Yeah, so I think the popular opinion is a lot of people have this as maybe their number one or close to number one Rush album. And I could see why. There's a lot to love about this album. There's a lot of great things going on. For me, I think like the opening of this album is amazing. The first 5 minutes of the title track Hemispheres rules. Some of the best music in the whole catalog. But then it starts to lose me a little with the whole story of the gods and the balance. It's like a game of Civilization, like the video game. But I don't know, I don't find it that interesting until we get to towards the end where you get to the I have memory and awareness. And like that I love. That's great. And it finishes pretty strong too. It's just not the most interesting epic, I think. The real strength for me of this album is side 2.
Indeed.
For me, Circumstances is one of the great Rush songs. I adore this little song. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a deep cut because this is a popular Rush record, I think, but it's still a really great song. And then, you get The Trees, which is a song that I don't love as much as I used to, but I mean, it's still Animal Farm for the Plant Kingdom. It's great. You can't go wrong, And then it ends with La Villa Strangiato, which is my favorite instrumental in the catalog. That's just an amazing tune. And the first Lifeson guitar solo in there is one of the best in the whole run of things. Lifeson rips on this. And it also has that iconic bass, little mini solo at the end too. I love every moment of this piece. La Villa is the highlight by far. By far,
yeah, I would agree with that. So I have Hemispheres a little bit higher. I have it at number 9. When Geddy Lee was talking about this album in his book, he said that every Rush album had that last minute song where it was like, we are 2 or 3 minutes under the runtime for a full album. We need to throw another song together at the very last minute, put it together in a day. And this has often produced some of their more exciting material, like say New World Man off the Signals record. But in this case, Geddy said that the entire Hemispheres album counts as a last minute track because they had something like 2 weeks to write and rehearse this material, and then they went right into the studio to record it. And so it was like this was put together, conceived and recorded and finished in like under a month or something like that. I mean, maybe the mixing and mastering went beyond that, but I think just the actual like from conception to tracking, it was like within a couple of weeks. And so as a consequence, Geddy was writing these vocal melodies without any concern for how they would be sung, and he was humming them. So like in his mind, he was singing them quietly. And a lot of times Rush wrote on acoustic guitars. So he was just kind of strumming and humming the vocals, and the guys were like, yeah, that sounds good. We like that. But when it came time to actually sing it, he and Terry Brown in the studio recording the vocals, it turned out that they were out of his range. And he had to push himself really, really hard. And it was a very frustrating and long, drawn out vocal session. Like he probably ended up spending more time on the vocals of this album than anything else. And as a result, I find his vocals to be rather strained on this album. And I had this memory, and I think I mentioned this in the prior video. I had this misconception that Geddy's voice was very harsh over the first couple of records, but I really think that comes from this album, because this is the only one where he's kind of hard to take for me at times. And it's really just side 1. Side 2, he's fine. But I agree with you that the first like maybe 10 minutes of Hemispheres is outstanding. It's like prog metal at its finest. And it kind of has lamnethitis for me. Like it just kind of meanders and it becomes less exciting. Now, the very end, like the last maybe 4 or 5 minutes of it, does manage to bring me back. And I like the little sweet short acoustic piece at the end, the one titled The Sphere. But overall, side 1 of this album doesn't hold together for me well enough to rank it higher. That being said, it's an album of 2 halves. It's like one foot is still in Farewell to Kings territory. The next is stepping toward Permanent Waves, in my opinion. So side 2, you have absolutely classic slab of music, in my opinion, and it saves the record. It makes it elevates it for me quite a bit. And like you said, Circumstances, that's a tune that I think would have fit, inner side A of Permanent Waves very easily. It's already got that kind of new wave, very short, concise song feel to it. And lyrically, you're dealing with Neil's time in London, trying to make it big, playing drums, and how frustrated he was that he wasn't getting anywhere with it. But, that song is like a minor classic. But then you have The Trees, which is one of their greatest songs. And I get it being overplayed, like you said, and maybe I don't like it as much as I used to either. But there's no denying that like it comes to life, like on Exit Stage Left and future live performances. But it truly is La Via Strangiato, a 10-minute journey into self-indulgence, as the liner notes suggest. And what I love about this is that this is another folkloric song. This comes from Alex Lifeson coming down, having breakfast with the guys on tour, and rambling about his dreams. And Alex would have these just epic cinematic dreams that were unlike anything. And I think it kind of bored Neil a little bit. Like, it's like, oh my God, somebody kill this guy. But it entertained them enough to write this surrealistic journey. And to me, that's more interesting. A song about Alex's dreams is far more interesting than anything thematically or story-wise happening inside one. I definitely agree. I definitely agree that this is a classic Rush record, but side 2 is that's really the meat.
Yeah, I agree. You kind of pointed this out as we were listening to these, that this is really a transition record.
It is.
I never really thought of it that way, because it is such a classic progressive album, but it totally is a transitional album.
Yeah.
They really point towards Permanent Waves.
Yes. Now, I don't think the band would agree. I think, Geddy Lee and the guys probably felt that Moving Pictures was the album that they were heading towards. But,
yes,
as we'll get further on in our ranking, I don't agree with that. I actually think that they're pretty fully formed and established by Permanent Waves.
Yeah.
And I kind of hear Moving Pictures as an extension of that. More than anything, but we'll get to Permanent Waves hopefully a little while later.
Yes, we will later for sure.
As a hint to our ranking, we'll get to it a little while later.
Well, if you haven't guessed, because we haven't talked about it yet, so